When I was just starting out in the workforce, I once fell so far as to become homeless. It was all due to a trap set by a jealous supervisor. I was falsely accused of being responsible for a project I had nothing to do with and was subsequently expelled from the company. Feeling hopeless about society, I lost all motivation to work and became homeless, spending my days by the riverbank. One day, a beautiful woman suddenly appeared and gave me sandwiches. After receiving a sandwich from her every day, I regained my strength and decided to rejoin society, accepting a job offer from a friend. Later, the company that had expelled me, now struggling, reached out to my thriving company, asking us to acquire them. However, during the acquisition talks, my former supervisor appeared as a director, leading me to distrust the opposing party and show a negative reaction to the acquisition. Cornered by our investigation, my former supervisor lost his composure and crumbled. I am Keith Brown. At 35, I handle app development for a company founded by my elementary school classmate, Wayne Foster, and I was just appointed vice president this year. 10 years ago, President Wayne Foster highly valued my app development skills and scouted me. Although ambitious enough to start his own company, Wayne was a man who never forgot sincerity in dealing with people. His honest management policy has been reflected in the company's performance, which has been consistently improving since its inception. Wayne says that the company's smooth growth is due to my development skills, and he has always highly appreciated my work, eventually promoting me to vice president. Personally, I was more interested in the freedom to innovate with our products than in managing the company, and initially I refused the vice presidency. However, knowing me since elementary school, Wayne assured me that the title was just a formality and that my job would remain the same, so I accepted the position. I wondered if it was right to decide on such an important role so casually, but Foster seemed to have another idea in mind. I am reluctant to boast, but our company has launched several hit products, all of which involved me in their development, making my name well known among those familiar with the industry. In this industry, those who demonstrate high ability are often recruited with high rewards. When scouting talented individuals, the compensation offered is crucial, and according to Foster, there are quite a few promising young people who admire me. Keith, as vice president, you would make our company particularly appealing to developers. In the competition for talent, just throwing money around won't beat the big companies, but if it's known that you hold all the development authority, that changes the conversation. So, you mean to say, by adding my name to the executive team, we can attract excellent young people with less money than the big companies would offer? Exactly. Really, you are so thorough in such matters. Although I joked about Wayne's calculating nature, I knew well that he never skimped on rewards. Moreover, our company's development environment really is free, as I have experienced firsthand. Wayne is strict about budget and deadlines, but when it comes to the development of the apps themselves, he rarely interferes. The environment Wayne provides allows us to work without being swayed by the latest trends or whimsical client requests, and I believe that young people who join our company gain invaluable freedom and experience in exchange for their salary. If becoming vice president means creating a rewarding environment for many dedicated workers, then I have no hesitation in accepting the role. Becoming vice president was a decision based on these experiences. I suddenly remembered the time, 10 years ago, when Wayne and I reunited and he invited me to join his company. Now, as vice president of a thriving company, I am filled with vigor, but the years leading up to my joining the company were the worst of my life. During that time, I experienced economic and mental decline to the extent of losing my place to live and even living as a homeless person. I grew up in an average family, facing the usual struggles but managing to graduate from college with a degree in programming, a subject I had excelled in and enjoyed since my student days. Job hunting was relatively smooth for me. Fortunately, the U.S. economy was experiencing a temporary upturn when I was job searching, which allowed me to secure job offers from 3 different companies quite quickly. I chose to work for a small app development company, where I was recognized as an immediate asset. Within just 3 months of joining, I had been assigned as the main handler for small projects, a testament to the quick impact I had made. The app one developed at that time was in a niche genre, so it wasn't widely recognized, but it was highly appreciated by a certain group of users. Subsequently, every app one developed consistently sold better than the clients had expected, and I began to be highly regarded within the company. In this industry, no matter how young, those who deliver results are valued, and titles follow. 2 years after joining, I became the leader for multiple development projects, and I was in a position to give instructions even to older employees. Whether dealing with older or younger colleagues, I always spoke politely, and when opinions seemed likely to clash, I never confronted them directly, always preferring to keep the conversation amiable. Since childhood, I've disliked conflicts, and even in situations where I thought I could win an argument logically, I avoided overpowering others, often deflecting the conversation with a joke to avoid ruining the mood. However, this ambiguous and unassertive nature of mine eventually led me into the greatest crisis of my life. At that time, my supervisor, James, was a section manager. He was 5 years older than me and still considered a junior within the company at 27. Given that he had become a section manager at such a young age, I believe James had the necessary skills. Initially, James was in the PC software development division, and I was in the smartphone app development division, so we had no direct contact. However, at that time, it was decided to merge the two divisions. At the same time, there were rumors of layoffs within the company. While the development personnel could not be cut, there was some overlap in management tasks, so it was said that particularly management positions would be reduced. Being young, I thought, it seems there will be some comings and goings nearby. But James viewed the situation quite differently. Even though he was only 27, being a section manager, he was acutely aware that he was also a target for layoffs. James's thinking was dangerous. If he was in a pinch, he would eliminate the cause, meaning the person who could put him in that situation. James targeted me. The young upstart who thinks he's something because he can do a bit. Planning to bring me down and thereby lower his own boss's rating, waiting for the opportunity to do so. At one time, a plan was proposed to expand the functionality of a PC software product to make it usable on smartphones, and James took charge of it, with me appointed as the main person responsible. I was already handling several projects, but I was enthusiastic and thought I could handle this one as well since it was just a matter of adapting an existing software to the current system. However, at the first meeting, James announced, "The adaptation for smartphones is already 90% complete." To everyone's surprise, James had anticipated this and had personally advanced the program modifications, and now only operational checks and minor revisions were left. Everyone praised James's quick response, and it was decided that personnel could be reduced since the situation was handled so well. But when my name came up as the person to check the program, James objected. "Keith is already leading other projects, so it wouldn't be right to burden him with this. Let me handle the checks with a newcomer. Keith can, well, it would help if he could handle the final approval." I felt confident in my capacity to handle the work normally, but James was determined to lead this project himself, so I obediently followed his lead. As I proceeded with other projects, James completed this work, and it was released as a smartphone version. The release was significantly ahead of schedule, and everyone was surprised by the speed, but I was the most shocked. "James, I heard the app has already been released. I thought I was supposed to do the final check." "Wait, what are you talking about? You sent me a message saying you completed the check and you had even approved it electronically." I trusted that and okayed the release. "I didn't formally approve anything. I haven't even seen the program. Don't start with baseless accusations now. My records show your approval was logged. That must be some mistake. Show me the program now. I want to be prepared in case something happens." "Something happens? If it does, it would be on you since you did the final check. Stop complaining now." James flatly said this and refused to listen any further. I tried to talk to the new employee James had assigned for the check, but discovered he had resigned last week. Despite it being a small company, I was often holed up in the development room, and it was not unusual for me to miss out on office gossip or changes in personnel. The employee had resigned just a few days ago, and as we weren't close, I had no idea he had left. As I inquired about the employee, some colleagues mentioned, "James was putting a lot of pressure on him, seems like he got fed up and moved on." A terrible premonition crept over me. The employee who had been working on the app's correction had left suddenly just before the release, pressured relentlessly by James. And now it appeared I had approved a program I didn't recognize. That premonition turned into a stark reality just a few hours later. Users who downloaded the app found that their smartphones were malfunctioning. After hearing the first reports, I finally managed to locate and check the program, only to find a critical error that affected the smartphone systems, causing issues depending on the model. I prepared and released a patch within minutes to prevent further damage, but some customers whose phones had stopped working were furious and threatened lawsuits. Then, James, who should have been responsible, dropped a shocking statement. I was concerned about releasing it too early. But Keith insisted it was completely fine, saying, if we release it a day early, we can increase our profits. Why can't you make that decision? I couldn't understand what James was saying at first. However, Keith is competent. Since Keith guaranteed it, I couldn't object further. Even if it meant missing out on some profits, if I had said I would participate in the final check, in that sense, I am partly responsible. What are you talking about? I never said any such thing. Now you're lying. Look, you even stamped your approval. Saying that, James presented documents with my supposed approval stamp. In fact, James had bribed a personnel staff member addicted to gambling to obtain my ID and password and unauthorizedly used my approval stamp. This was only revealed much later when Wayne Foster confronted the bribed personnel staff and got a confession. At the time, I had no way of knowing this and couldn't refute the documents in front of me. It was a moment where my passive nature played against me. I should have been shouting. This is nonsense. Someone has misused my approval stamp. And demanded the company to reveal the system logs. But for some reason, I lost the energy to defend myself. Moreover, with severe complaints flooding in and the whole company on edge, some colleagues took James's side and glared at me. Facing conflict, I've always preferred to resolve issues without confrontation, being bad at fighting back, if not unable to. While I should have insisted that the fault was entirely James's, and any resentment from colleagues towards me was misplaced, I just couldn't bring myself to do it at that moment. In response to my silence, James said, "See. He's gone quiet because it's hard to keep lying." And dominated the conversation. I can't remember the details of what followed. I think I lost most of my mental strength at that time. Eventually, the company concluded that I was mostly to blame as I had become nearly silent. Being labeled as someone who overestimated his own abilities and went rogue, no company within the industry was willing to hire me anymore. Later, I managed to resolve most of the issues by devising a recovery function for the malfunctioning smartphones, allowing the company to settle the matter with some compensation. After using up all my energy, I left the company I no longer belonged to and became reclusive at home. For a while, I lived off unemployment benefits and savings, but naturally, they were bound to run out if I did nothing. Despite that, my spirit was nearly dead. Unable to pay my apartment rent, I didn't try to stay illegally but left the place on the last day of my contract and wandered outside aimlessly. I visited a support center for the impoverished once, but since I looked healthy and unwilling to work, the authorities coldly told me there was nothing they could do for me. On my way back from there, I saw a poster for a food distribution for the homeless. Having not eaten properly for days, I found myself heading there. At the food service, people who lacked meals for various reasons gathered. The service was held every 2 or 3 days, and I survived for a while on those meals alone, sleeping rough. Taking in minimal calories, I spent days lying under a bridge, barely clinging to life. Eventually, a homeless person who had set up a small settlement nearby approached me, and I was able to move into a hut that had recently been vacated by its previous inhabitant. Having a space shielded from the rain and hidden from people's view was enough for me. If it meant returning to a world where I was subjected to irrational shouting, I preferred to stay here and do nothing. While the younger, stronger homeless went for day jobs, and others went fishing in the river or collected magazines and aluminum cans for work, I sat by the riverbank. One day, as I sat idly by the river, someone approached me. The footsteps were neither those of my homeless peers nor the local mischievous kids. When I looked up, I saw a woman dressed in an elegant dress walking directly towards me. She carried a basket and walked calmly, not seeming like she intended to complain about anything. Assuming she had some reason to be by the river, and thinking it might be uncomfortable for her to deal with a man who obviously looked homeless, I turned and started to walk away. At that moment, the woman called out, "Excuse me, please wait." In the open space, it was clear there were no other people around me. Hesitantly, I turned back. She was clearly gesturing towards me and approached at a brisk pace. She was quite beautiful from a distance and smiled gently, but I felt almost scared. As I moved to walk away again, she said, "Don't run away. I don't intend to do anything to you." Her tone, foreseeing my wariness, made me stop again. More than her words, it was the desperate sincerity in her voice that made me feel there was no malice in her. "Sorry to be so abrupt, but I thought you might not have eaten much." With that, she opened the basket and offered it to me. Inside were 3 sandwiches wrapped in plastic. "For me?" "Yes." "Are you part of the group that does the food distribution?" "No, I'm not a member, but I've helped out a bit recently." As I faced the sandwiches she offered, I felt an urge to bite into it immediately, but my caution hadn't fully subsided. It was true that this woman had approached me alone, but the oddity of a young woman approaching a homeless person still lingered in my mind. I even considered the possibility that the sandwich could be laced with something. She stared intently at me for a moment, then said, "Shall I taste it first?" "What? You look like you're wondering whether it's safe to eat." "I understand your caution, though." Without waiting for my response, she took one sandwich, unwrapped it, broke it in half, and began eating one half. She then rewrapped the other half and offered it to me again. "Are you thinking I might have only laced part of the sandwich and avoided that part myself?" Her unexpected humor made me smile, a sensation that felt foreign as my face seemed to stretch in unfamiliar ways after not smiling for so long. "If you had gone to all that trouble to plan something with this sandwich, I'd respect the effort enough to fall for it." With that, I took a big bite. In front of the mysterious beauty, I wished I could eat more gracefully, but my hunger won out. I devoured the sandwich almost greedily and thanked her. "You're welcome." As she spoke, I walked away from the spot, and this time, she didn't call me back. At the time, I didn't ponder why she had chosen to help me. Maybe she was a well-bred young lady who felt a fleeting interest in helping the homeless after a casual involvement in a food distribution. The next day, I was by the riverbank again when I heard familiar footsteps at the same time as the previous day. I turned around, half expecting her not to return, but there she was approaching with the same ease as when we first met. In her hand was a basket, this time containing 4 sandwiches, one more than the day before. After some light conversation, I ended up eating all the sandwiches. She continued to appear at the same time every day, except when there was a scheduled food distribution. Even on bad weather days, she would show up and share sandwiches with me. Gradually, we began to talk like friends. However, I never spoke about my past that led to homelessness, and she never asked. The distance she maintained felt comfortable to me, and I found myself looking forward to her visits. Yet, contrary to my feelings, I advised her to stop this routine soon. "Why should I? You're sensible and have a stable life. It's fine to seek an adventure for a few days, but not to involve yourself long-term with people you should avoid, like me." "People you should avoid? You mean, homeless people?" "That, and, well, there are just some people who are no good." "It's fine to talk like this, but what if I start exploiting your kindness, or worse, what if I become obsessed with you and disrupt your life?" "There are no such people as no good. It's just a matter of whether or not you get along. And I don't think there's anything about you that doesn't mesh with me. People change. Listen, I might seem harmless now, but becoming emotionally attached could change my behavior towards you drastically. You wouldn't have the physical strength to fend off a man. Well, I might not be very strong, but I think I could handle a thin man like you." "Hey. That's underestimating men too much. I thought you were naive, but you really don't know much about men, do you?" "It's not my responsibility, but if you keep underestimating the world like that, you'll end up in trouble." "Still." "What? You're a good person. People may change a bit, but you care about others and, while you joke, you're genuinely concerned." Her words seemed to see right through to my true feelings, and I was visibly shaken. "Don't assume you know my inner thoughts. I just don't want someone who's been as kind as you to be taken advantage of by someone who's careless." "Too late." "What? You must think I'm just a sheltered girl looking for a thrill by playing at helping the homeless." Ever since I met her, she seemed to have a knack for reading my thoughts just by looking into my eyes, and her accuracy always amazed me. I've seen and experienced enough of the world, too. I'm not just here giving you sandwiches because you're homeless. Maybe I've spoken too much. With that, she stood up and left. Usually, I was the one to abruptly end our conversations, but today was different. Perhaps something I said had not amused her. She didn't show up for a few days afterward. I regretted perhaps crossing a line in our last conversation, but at the same time, if it meant she wouldn't return to this unsafe place, maybe that was for the best. Then one day, different, more vigorous footsteps approached. I finally found you, Keith. Been holed up here, well, it's open here, so more like open hiding, huh? Anyway, don't care. How about you come work for my company? The energetic newcomer was Wayne. As if swapping places with her, Wayne had appeared, skipping formalities and ready to forcibly pull me back into society. He had founded an app development company years ago, achieving moderate success but felt a stronger development team was necessary for further growth. He had been searching for a skilled programmer. During that time, a scandal erupted that resulted in my being ousted from my previous company. Wayne Foster, who knew my character and abilities well, couldn't believe I was involved in such clumsy wrongdoing and suspected that there was something more to the story. Now that the industry had written off my abilities, he thought he could definitely scout me with his financial resources, but he had no lead since my apartment was vacated. However, Wayne didn't give up. He asked around about my whereabouts and even used a private investigator to gather rumors, eventually hearing that someone resembling me was living by the riverside and came to see for himself. Initially, I had no energy left to engage with society again and refused Wayne's offer. However, he persistently visited me, not willing to give up. During this time, I reunited with the woman, who had been absent for several days due to a sudden family tragedy. I had thought she had taken offense at my previous comments about her personal life, so I was genuinely relieved to learn that wasn't the case and felt an urge for her to stop coming here. Even if I told her not to come, she wouldn't listen. I could disappear to make her give up, but that would be too disrespectful after all the care she had given me. After much deliberation, I concluded that if I joined Wayne's company, it would eliminate the reason for her to bring sandwiches here. Thus, with a decision that lacked much initiative on my part, I accepted Wayne's offer. When I told her about my decision to join a friend's company, she was surprised but soon smiled joyfully and congratulated me. It was then that I truly noticed her beauty, as if for the first time, captivated by her smile. I'm really glad. I wasn't sure I could keep doing this forever. Wait, if I hadn't agreed to work, you were planning to continue indefinitely. If I didn't, you really would have wasted away to just skin and bones, wouldn't you? If that happened, it would have just been my time to go. You shouldn't give up on yourself like that. Well, it's my life, isn't it? You mustn't give up. You have the skills that a company president came to scout for, right? Then you should do what you can, enjoy life to the fullest, and only think that's enough after you've done all that. This was the first time she had shown such strong emotion. Seeing my astonished look, she glanced at the water and said, I might have said too much. Sorry. No, you might be right. I can't promise anything, but I'll try to do things to the extent that I don't have any regrets. Hearing my words, she smiled again and said, I feel a little relieved now. And so, by the riverside, she and I shook hands and parted ways. It occurred to me that I had introduced myself as Keith, but she had never offered her own name, nor had I asked. However, I felt that was okay. 10 years later, I had helped Wayne grow the company significantly and had even reached the position of vice president. My future seemed bright. Having achieved such comfort, I found myself increasingly thinking about the woman, hoping she was leading a satisfying life somewhere. Then, quite by chance, I ran into her again. The trigger was the sound of footsteps. Ever since living by the river, I had become extremely sensitive to the sounds people make. One day, as the elevator in my company building was under maintenance and I was going down the stairs, I passed a janitorial staff member carrying a bucket. She was wearing a hat and mask, showing only her eyes, and I wouldn't have normally looked closely at someone passing by. However, she paused on the stairs to nod at me, so I nodded back politely and continued down. Almost immediately, I heard her footsteps going up the stairs and into the corridor above, and something about the rhythm reminded me of the footsteps of the woman who used to bring me sandwiches by the riverside. I spun around and rushed back up the stairs to the corridor she had entered. She stopped and turned around as she heard my footsteps. The moment she caught my gaze, her eyes, the only part visible under the mask, matched perfectly with the woman I remembered. Ignoring her apparent discomfort at my sudden approach, I called out. "Are you the one who used to bring sandwiches to the homeless? You remember, right? The guy who was just skin and bones by the river." "That's me, Keith." "Ah. What?" Her eyes widened in a reaction that only someone who had fully grasped the implications of my words could have. "You, from that time." She was stunned to learn that I had risen to the position of vice president in the company she happened to be cleaning, speechless with surprise, but soon excused herself saying, "I have work now." Unable to hold her up during her work, I asked when she would be finished and arranged to meet again at the company lobby at that time. In her casual clothes, she still maintained a striking beauty even after 10 years. I invited her to dinner, and we took the time to catch up on everything that had happened. It was during this conversation that I learned her name was Emma Johnson. She was pleased to hear about my success in business, joking that it was worth saving me from starvation. Meanwhile, she shared a bit about her own past. "Actually, I was married once a long time ago, but our personalities didn't match, and we quickly divorced. It was one of those marriages arranged by our families, so after the divorce, it was difficult to go back to my parents' home. I've been working on my own ever since. Still strong for not ending up homeless." I joked lightly, trying to keep the atmosphere from becoming too serious. Emma seemed to appreciate my effort to lighten the mood and laughed in response. The next day, I shared this encounter with Wayne, who exclaimed without a hint of tact, "Man, that's like a twist of fate. Why don't you marry her?" I dismissed his suggestion immediately. Wayne then turned serious and said, "I have a business proposal for you as vice president." I heard that Wayne was considering acquiring an app development company. Normally, I would have just said, "If it's about management, let Wayne handle it as he likes." However, the name of the company was shockingly familiar. It was the very same one where I had been trapped and ousted by manager James. This twist of fate made it impossible for me to remain indifferent. "Can't exactly buy them out without consulting you, can I?" "Well, if you've run the numbers and it looks good, why not go ahead? It's not just about the numbers. The company hasn't been doing well lately. Even though they've maintained a certain scale, there's a high turnover. A lot of young people leave within a few months. It seems the toxic culture there hasn't changed since your time. If young people are leaving like that, it could mean there's a lot of bullying." Thinking back on my own unjust experiences and imagining young people suffering similarly made me feel gloomy. "So, here's the thing. I'll handle the financial discussions, but I need you to look into the human aspect. We have a meeting with that company soon, and I'd like you to attend as the vice president." Well, it's been 10 years. They've probably mostly forgotten about me and moved on. Thus, Wayne and I were set to attend a meeting to consider the acquisition. While my recent reunion with Emma had been a joyous occasion, this meeting led to a reunion I was decidedly not happy about. As several company executives entered the meeting room, I caught sight of James, the manager who had been instrumental in my ousting. The moment I saw him, I felt a nauseating churn in my stomach and had an overwhelming urge to storm out of the room. Wayne, always perceptive, noticed my discomfort and seemed to realize it had something to do with James. James, either indifferent to my presence or failing to recognize me after my years of homelessness, coolly handed me his business card. It read, Executive Director. A title I couldn't believe he had earned through fair means. As the technical discussions about the acquisition began, Wayne expressed concerns about the company's declining development capabilities. James quickly blamed it on the lack of grit in our young workers. It was disgraceful for an executive to blame his young staff in such a meeting. I was certain that James had secured his position by sabotaging talented individuals just like he had done to me, taking credit for others' work and likely engaging in similar misdeeds. It was no surprise that the company was struggling with retention and innovation, and here he was, trying to secure a good position in our company by painting himself as capable. The atmosphere grew tense, and the company's president had to repeatedly intervene as James kept reverting to blaming his younger staff, complaining, I do so much, but it's the surroundings, the undisciplined younger generation. Unable to bear it any longer, I stood up and interrupted James. This is unacceptable. It can't all be the fault of the young staff. Keith, or should I say Vice President Brown now? You had your share of issues at our company, didn't you? And now you dare to criticize. James glared at me unreservedly. Wayne's patience snapped before mine. This is a meeting to discuss our potential acquisition, and Keith here is a man whose capabilities I have enough faith in to appoint him as vice president. To insult him is to insult me. Don't think you can get away with that. Well, no offense, but remember, this vice president caused us significant trouble before. Excuse me. Though it's in the past, I still remember the losses his actions caused the company. James was clearly not in the mood to relent. Keith, I'll handle the financial terms later. If there's anything you want to condition on this deal, tell me now. Remove James from the executive board. At the very least, after we acquire it, he should not hold a position that allows him to influence personnel decisions. That's my condition. Wait. Are you bringing personal grudges into this? That's highly inappropriate. Inappropriate? It sounds like a perfectly reasonable judgment to me. I can't work with someone who'd manipulate and abuse his position to harm others. So you're saying, the man who once caused our company so much grief is now in a position to judge me. I am the victim here. And stop accusing me of bullying without evidence. James's tirade continued unabated, and by now, even the opposing company's executives were visibly unsettled. At that moment, there was a knock on the door, and Emma, dressed in a cleaner's uniform, peeked in. Seeing the room full of people, she quickly apologized. It seemed she had mistaken this conference room for another, one that was not in use. Due to James's outburst, the room had fallen silent, so Emma probably thought it was empty and knocked only as a formality before immediately opening the door. In any case, Emma's only option was to apologize and quickly leave the scene, and we had no intention of chasing after her to complain. However, things didn't go as expected. Instead of quickly retreating, Emma stopped and stared intently into the room. Her gaze was not on me, but rather, it seemed to fix on James, who was visibly unsettled by her presence. What are you doing? Emma's unexpected actions were not over yet. Instead of closing the door, she reopened it and boldly stepped forward, standing firmly in front of James. The executives from the other company were also frozen, unsure why a cleaner had barged in. Normally, Emma would have been immediately told to leave. However, before anyone could react, she took further action. Wearing her cleaning gloves, she grabbed James by the collar and began to shake him. What are you doing here? Planning to make trouble for Keith again? I won't allow it. What the hell are you doing? Let go, you fool. As James tried to push her away, Emma's intensity didn't waver. Instead, James found himself being pushed back. You witch. Just as James raised his fist to strike, I leapt up and grabbed his arm. Seeing my face, Emma seemed to snap back to reality and let go of James. Instinctively, I positioned myself between them. Why are you here disrupting a business meeting? Keith, why are you taking her side instead of mine? I don't know what her reasons are, but you were about to hit a woman, so I intervened. If you're so quick to resort to violence against a woman, I can only imagine what you're like in the office. I was defending myself against a lunatic. So now self-defense is bullying. That's a twisted accusation. What you were doing is no different from a serious crime. Hey. Emma. Don't say unnecessary things. Don't call me by my name so familiarly. You're the reason I went through hell because of that arranged marriage. And now you're trying to drag a decent man down too. As this revelation unfolded, I realized they had once been married. Emma had hinted at a failed marriage, but I never knew James was the other party. Enough of your noise. What do you think this is, you crazy woman? Get out of here. Call security. We can't discuss anything with her here. Kick me out if you must. But take him with you. Don't listen to him. He's always been dropping people to climb up. Shut up, you. Now, it was James who needed restraining as he began to lose control. That's enough. Emma, was it? It's a bit problematic that you've stepped in like this. Wayne said this, causing Emma to bite her lip in frustration and look down, while James smirked as if he had won. But James, your behavior is quite strange too. It seems like you've been trying to prevent her from speaking every time she tries to say something. So, here's what I propose, let's hear both sides out. Her stories are just marital gripes. There's no point in discussing such things here. No, it's not that simple. The issue at hand is whether James, as an executive, engages in power harassment. Emma, as his wife, would have observed his behavior and might know something crucial. It's worth listening to her for our acquisition decision. Keith, don't mess around with me. You're the one messing around. The insults you've thrown at Keith alone are enough to call off this deal. If you don't like it, keep quiet. Wayne was furious, and the other company's president also showed his agreement, which made James sulk and fall silent. Finally, Emma was able to start speaking calmly. James, he has climbed the ranks by setting traps for many people, boasting about it as if it were a badge of honor. Emma recounted how, soon after they married, she was shocked to hear James brag about taking credit for the achievements of younger colleagues. Initially, she thought he was joking, but it was no joke. He detailed how he had caused his superior's downfall and then took his place. James obtained his rivals' IDs, authorized reckless budget applications on their behalf, and caused financial damage to the company, making them take the blame. Using this tactic, he managed to eliminate his competitors one by one and climb the ranks to become a manager. He used the same method to set me up as well. The methods he boasted about match the incident attributed to Keith. My own investigations have shown that Keith made no mistakes at that time. It was James, as an executive, who took over Keith's ID and deliberately embedded fatal errors in an app, making it look like Keith approved it, leading to severe complaints and Keith's expulsion. You all are making baseless accusations. Here's what I propose, Mr. President. I have gathered some investigative documents about Keith's case, which I will send to you. Whether you believe them or not is up to you, but maybe you could informally interview some of the young people who left. My guess is you'll find many similar stories to Keith's. Neither Emma's nor Wayne's accounts had concrete physical evidence. However, the realism and detail in their narratives made it hard to believe they were merely fabrications. Moreover, Wayne produced detailed investigative documents on the spot, convincing everyone present that James's actions were indeed true. There's no evidence, no proof. You're just making things up. We will conduct a full internal investigation of the past incidents and report back to Mr. Wayne. If it's found that James habitually misused other people's IDs, there will certainly be logs to prove it. At that moment, James screamed and collapsed into his chair, suggesting he hadn't managed to delete all the past logs. The upcoming internal investigation would likely not be to determine if the allegations were true but rather to present the evidence of James's wrongdoing. Thus, the acquisition discussions were suspended, and a now thoroughly discredited James was hastily escorted out by the company executives. Emma, who had brought a fierce energy into the room, now seemed much smaller. I'm sorry for disrupting your important meeting. What are you talking about? You helped expose that man's true nature. Indeed. Just imagine how much damage he could have caused if he had been left with significant authority even for a short while. Keith, to think, because of such a scumbag, you were almost pushed to the brink of losing your life. I should have stopped him from breathing earlier. No, no. Let's not say things like that. Seeing Emma's intense expression, Wayne quickly tried to smooth things over. Exactly, Emma. There's no reason you should bear the burden of his actions. However, I do have something I'd like to ask you. What is it? Why have you helped me so many times? Not just giving me sandwiches by the river, even now, you defended me against James. Well, that's because, the sandwich thing could be chalked up to you being an oddball who likes to help people, but this recent incident clearly shows you were trying to help me. I don't understand why you'd go to such lengths for me. I can't believe you still don't remember. Well, that's so like you, Keith. What do you mean? Well, Keith, Wayne too. I was at the same elementary school as you guys. Wayne and I exchanged glances, our mouths agape in surprise. You really don't remember, huh? Well, it was a long time ago, and I wasn't exactly a standout kid. Emma then explained why she felt compelled to help me. During elementary school, she had been mildly bullied. It wasn't anything violent, but at the time, there was a bad culture in our school where kids would pick on each other over appearances, grades, or economic status. Emma was almost made a target of such bullying, but I had stepped in several times to help her out. Unfortunately, I didn't have a clear memory of these incidents. But according to Emma, I had a knack for intervening whenever someone was about to be teased. I was good at diverting the conversation and making everyone laugh about something else, thus saving the targeted kid from becoming the center of attention. I think there are many others from our school days who are quietly grateful to you, Keith. But it never felt right to say thanks. Did that happen? I can't recall the specifics. People who were helped like that don't forget, even if the helper does. When I found out right after getting married that James, all puffed up, was bragging about educating some youngster, and I realized he was talking about you, Keith, I nearly lost it. Emma discovered that her husband had been behind my downfall, and it enraged her beyond measure. This revelation broke her marriage completely, and she divorced James shortly after. While searching for work, she volunteered at a soup kitchen, where she noticed a gaunt version of me and decided she had to help somehow, thus beginning to bring me food. Connections between people really do extend everywhere, don't they? But to meet again after all these years from elementary school, and to recognize an emaciated Keith at a glance, you really had a sharp eye. It's the way people walk. What? People have slightly different ways of walking. I'm good at recognizing it. I can tell who someone is just from behind, based on their walk alone. Even though you looked different then, the way you walked was exactly how I remembered Keith from school. That's why I brought the sandwich over, and after talking to you, I was sure it was you. But, knowing you were in that state because of James, I was too scared to reveal who I was. Now, I finally understood why she hadn't wanted to share her personal details back then. I see, recognized by the walk. I'm all about recognizing people by their feet. I chuckled, and both Wayne and Emma looked puzzled. As for what happened after, James was fired after an internal investigation revealed his misdeeds. His habit of stealing IDs and forging documents was a crime serious enough to have been handed over to the police. He was only not reported out of some residual goodwill. After leaving the company, James lost his income and had to move out of the upscale apartment he had boasted about as an executive. He might now be spending his days aimlessly by the riverside, much like I once did, though it's unlikely anyone will bring him sandwiches out of gratitude. As for me, I proposed a relationship to Emma, and we began dating with the intention to marry. Our conversations by the river had assured us of our mutual understanding and compatibility. We both felt it was the natural course for our lives to take. Regarding the acquisition, once James was out of the company, Wayne officially gave the green light. As vice president, I now aim to improve the work environment for the young employees who had suffered under James's regime. I'm sure Emma will continue to support me every step of the way.